Welcome to our channel. Today we're wading into the murky swamp, not of Florida politics, well, kind of, but of the potential nomination of Pam Bondi as U.S. Attorney General. Now I know what you're thinking. Ahmed, this sounds drier than a popcorn fart in a sandstorm. And you'd be right, on the surface. But trust me, beneath the veneer of legal jargon and political maneuvering lies a story more fascinating and frankly more baffling than a seagull trying to eat a bagel whole. Over the next few minutes, we'll dissect 7 key points about Bondi's career, from her time as Florida's top legal eagle to her penchant for appearing on television screens, seemingly more often than a Geico commercial. Buckle up, because we're about to delve into a world of lawsuits, political maneuvering, and enough legal complexities to make your head spin faster than a dreidel on a freshly waxed floor. Alright, let's rewind to 2011 when Lady Gaga's Born This Way ruled the airwaves and Charlie Sheen was busy winning. It was also the year Pam Bondi took the helm as Florida's Attorney General. Being AG of Florida is like being a park ranger at Jurassic Park. Chaos is inevitable. Over her 8 years, Bondi faced hurricanes, both literal and metaphorical. She tackled the opioid epidemic and synthetic drug abuse. Bondi also helped homeowners during the foreclosure crisis. One of her notable crusades was against the Affordable Care Act. She joined a lawsuit challenging the law's constitutionality. Bondi took the case all the way to the Supreme Court. But Bondi's time in office wasn't without controversy. And then there was the Donald Trump Foundation donation kerfuffle, raising many eyebrows. Now, being Attorney General isn't all about grandstanding and political maneuvering. Sometimes it's about rolling up your sleeves and diving headfirst into the legal trenches, battling it out with corporations that have more lawyers than a phone book has numbers. And Bondi had her fair share of those showdowns. Take, for instance, her lawsuit against the pharmaceutical giant Merck over its painkiller Vioxx. This wasn't just some small-time legal spat. This was a multi-state behemoth of a case with billions of dollars on the line. Bondi argued that Merck had misled the public about the drug's safety, leading to heart attacks and strokes. It was a classic David versus Goliath scenario. Except in this version, David had a power suit and a team of legal eagles ready to pounce. And it wasn't just Big Pharma that felt Bondi's legal wrath. She also went after the tobacco industry, because, let's face it, someone had to. Bondi fought to uphold Florida's landmark settlement with cigarette manufacturers, ensuring they coughed up billions of dollars for healthcare costs related to smoking. It was a victory for public health, and a reminder that even the most powerful industries aren't above the law, at least in theory. But Bondi's legal record wasn't all about sticking it to the man. She also faced criticism for her handling of certain cases, particularly those involving police shootings of unarmed black men. Critics argued that she was too quick to side with law enforcement and too slow to seek justice for the victims. Now let's talk about an issue that's about as universally reviled as slow internet speeds and finding a hair in your food: human trafficking. Bondi made combating this modern-day slavery a cornerstone of her tenure as Attorney General. She launched initiatives, increased penalties for traffickers, and worked to raise public awareness about the issue. On paper, it all sounds pretty commendable. After all, who could possibly be against stopping the exploitation of vulnerable people? Bondi even traveled around the state, speaking at conferences and events, highlighting the horrors of human trafficking and urging people to be vigilant. She became a vocal advocate for victims, pushing for legislation that would provide them with greater support and protection. But, and you knew there was a but coming, didn't you? Some critics argued that Bondi's efforts, while well-intentioned, were more about generating positive headlines than enacting meaningful change. They pointed to the fact that despite her tough talk on human trafficking, Florida remained a hub for the crime. It's a complex issue and there's no easy solution. But Bondi's record on human trafficking, like many aspects of her career, is a mixed bag of genuine efforts and lingering questions about whether those efforts were enough. Alright folks, time for a quick show of hands. Who here loves a good scam? Anyone? No? Shocking, I know. It turns out most people aren't too keen on being swindled out of their hard-earned cash. And Pam Bondi, defender of the people's wallets, knew this. That's why she made cracking down on consumer fraud a key part of her platform. Now, to be fair, Florida is practically a petri dish for shady business practices. It's like the Bermuda Triangle of questionable timeshares and dubious investment schemes. So Bondi certainly had her work cut out for her. She went after everything from bogus charities to phony debt relief companies, wielding her legal authority like a fly swatter at a picnic. And she had some wins, no doubt. Remember those robocalls about your car's extended warranty? Yeah, Bondi went after those folks with the fury of 1,000 suns. She also targeted companies that were jacking up prices on essential goods after hurricanes, because nothing says opportunism like profiting off of people's misery. And you knew there had to be a but, right? Some critics argued that Bondi's focus on consumer protection was more about scoring political points than enacting real change. They pointed to instances where she seemed to go after low-hanging fruit, targeting small-time scammers while giving larger corporations a pass. Now, in the current political climate, bipartisanship is about as rare as a sober night out with Charlie Sheen back in the day. It's like spotting a unicorn riding a Segway through Times Square. Theoretically possible, but highly unlikely. Yet Pam Bondi has a knack for, if not outright bipartisanship, then at least a semblance of civility in her dealings with political opponents. Don't get me wrong, she's a staunch Republican, about as conservative as a Ted Cruz Christmas card. But throughout her career, Bondi has shown a willingness to work across the aisle, to find common ground with Democrats on certain issues. For instance, she collaborated with then Vice President Joe Biden on initiatives to combat domestic violence, proving that even sworn political enemies can find common cause when it comes to punching metaphorical Nazis, or in this case, actual abusers. Now, cynics might say that this is all just savvy political maneuvering, a way to soften her image and appeal to a wider base. And they might be right, but hey, if a little political expediency leads to actual progress on important issues, who are we to complain? It's a bit like finding a $20 bill in your old jeans. Sure, it's probably been through some questionable situations, but you're not going to turn it down, are you? Let's face it, folks, politics in the 21st century is as much about sound bites and social media savvy as it is about policy and legislation. And in this arena, Pam Bondi is no slouch. She's a natural in front of the camera, as comfortable discussing legal intricacies on CNN as she is chatting about her favorite recipes on The View. Now, some might scoff at this, dismissing it as mere showmanship. But there's no denying that Bondi's ability to connect with audiences, to explain complex legal matters in a way that even your goldfish could grasp, is an asset. In an age of information overload and short attention spans, sometimes you need someone who can break down the issues in a way that's both informative and engaging. Think of it this way. Would you rather listen to a dry, monotone lecture on the intricacies of antitrust law, or have Pam Bondi explain it to you while whipping up a batch of her famous key lime pie? Yeah, I thought so. The woman knows how to work a room and a camera lens, and she's not afraid to use those skills to get her message across. All right, folks, let's not beat around the bush. Pam Bondi is a law and order kind of gal. We're talking about someone who probably has a framed picture of Antonin Scalia on her nightstand. Her legal philosophy is about as subtle as a sledgehammer in a china shop, and just as likely to leave a trail of shattered expectations in its wake. Throughout her career, Bondi has consistently sided with law enforcement, advocating for tougher sentencing guidelines, increased penalties for drug offenses, and a general lock 'em up and throw away the key approach to criminal justice. Now, whether you agree with this approach or not is a matter of personal opinion. But there's no denying that Bondi's stance has resonated with a certain segment of the population, particularly those who believe that the criminal justice system is too lenient on offenders. Of course, this approach has also drawn its fair share of criticism, with opponents accusing Bondi of being out of touch with the realities of mass incarceration, racial disparities in the justice system, and the need for criminal justice reform. They argue that her policies disproportionately target minority communities and do little to address the root causes of crime. So, there you have it, folks. A whirlwind tour through the career of Pam Bondi, a woman who's never met a television camera she didn't like or a lawsuit she wouldn't consider. Is she qualified to be the next U.S. Attorney General? Well, that's a question that only the Senate can answer. But what we can say is this. Bondi is a complex figure, a study in contrasts. She's a skilled lawyer with a knack for public speaking and a penchant for courting controversy. She's a staunch conservative who's not afraid to reach across the aisle, a fierce advocate for law enforcement who's also championed consumer protection. Ultimately, whether you view her as a crusading hero or a political opportunist, there's no denying that Pam Bondi has left her mark on Florida politics. And who knows, maybe she's just getting started. Stay tuned, folks, because this story is far from over.